What's up? Rachele, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back, Tito.
Yeah, I think I consider this kind of like a workshop for me to work out my ideas. I guess I'll start with a little bit of gratitude to you. When we recorded that episode, it never released as a full episode, but we shared a bunch of the clips from it, and I still am sharing a bunch of clips from it. It kind of like jump-started Craft Talk all over again. And I was, for being away for over a year and a half or so, I didn't know if it was like gonna come back with as much energy because I didn't know what it was gonna look like. And talking to you really, it just jump started it. It's just like, oh, okay, I remember how this feels again. So I just want to thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, it's been exciting to see all the other different conversations and the vast differenceness of them, and like how people present themselves and what they're talking about and the different angles of things you're talking about. Like, it's been really exciting. So, but I'm always happy to talk with you. It's like we're kind of like that home base to jumpstart our things. So I feel the
exactly.
same.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, we outside of sharing on social media, you and I are always texting about just like the landscape of social media, right? We're always either gripes about it or, oh, this is cool. Mostly gripes. Which is fun.
Lately, yeah.
It's fun to have that relatable kind of topic with someone. And with me kind of being on this like kick and like I'm just going and going and going, I feel like the amount of content that I have, there's so much of it right now where it almost takes the pressure off of the social media-ness of things. And it's such a relief. That's why I'm like really grateful that like we jump started it with our conversation. I was able to figure out a little bit of a new system with like basically generating all of these little pieces of things that I could publish and post. And now that I'm like 3 or 4 or 5 interviews in, I just have this backlog and I don't have to have that like scarcity mindset right now. I don't have that scarcity mindset of like, oh no, I'm running out of things to do or say or post. Now I can just kind of focus on what my next conversation is going to be. So I guess let me ask you, like, what's your relationship with like social media lately? Like from your perspective, from your end?
Truthfully, from my end, I am consuming a lot more than I'm creating. I'm grateful for you in the sense that you're kind of creating for me a little bit, which has led to some other conversations and whatnot within my world of people. I will say that I still have a lot of activity on like the back end side of people still DMing me for advice or still doing consulting things and still having conversations about how to approach things on social media with people. But my personal public presence is really limited. And I know you and I, in a brief separate conversation, had kind of touched on that in the sense of I'm feeling the decision fatigue on putting anything publicly out, or I'm sort of grappling with why do I have to make what I do public? Why? Right? Not in like a negative way, but like, why am I making any of this public? Why are we making our art public? And it is always super helpful for me to go back and even things that you share of like other artists explaining. I obviously know why we need to make things public, especially as artists and creatives, but I'm stuck in that limbo of I think even last time when we spoke, I was stuck very much in limbo of like, I want it to be super good, right? I want it to be great before I put it out there. But now I feel like I've, even discussing that with you and even talking through some of that mentally of like, okay, great can be relative and whatnot. And also and now I'm a proponent of messy is also totally fine. It helps you get from where you got A to B and move you along the process. But now it's more of okay, what is it going to be? Right. So I feel that then there's also this other presence of, in a lot of the conversations I'm still having with work and business, of social media is changing all the time, but at a pace that is almost unsustainable. So by the time I wrap my head around something that maybe I want to do, it's changed, right? There's also, depending on people listening to this, like they just put in the legislation to ban TikTok, right? It's not going anywhere right now, and it may not actually go anywhere, but it's like overnight, there are people's, entire strategies that are based around that platform and whatnot. And it's still a platform that we see thriving, right? Well, okay, but it also might disappear in 9 months, so it's tricky. The other thing is that Instagram releases different things and changes its algorithms, or Facebook, all these different platforms. Twitter is not even remotely the same of what it was even a year ago. So it's complicated, and I think that's also gets in the way of, like, I almost have this feeling of, not that social media is dying. I don't think it's going to die. I think it's here, but I feel like we're in this weird in-between, almost like a purgatory of, like, the way we did it is dying, but we haven't figured out or seen what the next way is yet. It's not clear. So I sometimes get stuck in, I don't know if I want to do anything yet, right? Because it doesn't feel as good anymore to put it out in this way on these platforms, when I know, not necessarily I know that it doesn't work, but it's just, I feel like we're watching it die. So,
it's a really weird feeling, because it's like a moving target, right? Obviously, you can say the algorithm is a moving target, but at the same time, us as individuals, we have that pendulum that swings back and forth, where we're wondering, how do I approach my art or my creativity in the way I communicate it on this platform? Do I do the shitty is pretty kind of mentality, where it's just like you throw everything out, you show the process, the good, the bad? Or do you have a more refined, curated thing? Or you swing you're in the middle, where you're kind of doing a little bit of both? That changes depending on what season you're in. Like right now, I'm in I have stuff, I'm going to share it. I'm going to be mostly non-apologetic about posting as much as I want because I have it. But I know inevitably at some point I'm going to swing the other way, and I'm going to hate everything. And I'm going to feel like the work that I was doing really isn't that good. All at the same time, the landscape of how social media functions is changing. So it's kind of like it feels daunting when, going back to your main point, why are we doing this in the first place? And we don't have to, I actually copied and pasted this as a note, but I think this was the same conversation that we were having just in text. We don't have to share it if you don't feel comfortable, but you said something very profound, and I'll just read it. And you were telling me, and through text, it was just, you said that I feel like there's this struggle of wanting to be public with things because I'd like people to enjoy what I create, but then also, why can't it be enough for me to just do it for fun? And I think you were talking about piano, because you're a piano player and you've been competitive in the piano. How would you explain your... I guess walk me through your experience with piano, because I don't think we've really talked about that too much.
I don't think we did. So I started playing at 3. I started competing at 5. I went on to play numerous other instruments and lean into vocal lessons and stuff really seriously as well too. But music and piano became my whole life and my world, where I ended up going to school for it. I ended up getting a performance degree, getting a teaching certificate. Obviously we met through music business school, like music became everything. And even from there, I started teaching. I was a piano teacher for 20 years. I only recently, very recently, stopped teaching. And I didn't stop teaching because I hated teaching. I stopped teaching because I realized that after 20 years, I felt like I was phoning it in, and I don't want to be doing that kind of service to any of my students, right? I want them to have a teacher who's fully present, and giving their all with that. But even in through my process with teaching and playing and performing, I was a studio musician for a long time too, and most of my 20s. Piano was as I've gotten older and really thought about it. It's this thing that I'm very good at. very talented at, I do enjoy, but I've almost never approached it from a not work perspective. Even when I was little, you're competing. There's an end game here. It's not, you're not playing. Truly, I'm not playing for fun. And I didn't take lessons for fun. I took strict classical, very, very regimented lessons. And music school is no joke. You know, it's 0 credit classes across the board of you just having to perform and play all the time and student teach and all kinds of stuff. And that is a joy and a luxury to be able to do something like that. That is a hobby to most people, that I was able to do that professionally for a long time. And I never took it for granted that I got to do something I love and enjoy like that. But what happens when you step back from that, and now I just want to, I watch pianists, and I haven't learned all the music there is to learn. There are so many pieces I hear, and especially even new things where it's like, oh, I really want to play that. I want to play that. I want to play that. But trying to just practice and then play it, and then I just go, okay, that's it. And I just step away from the piano. It's not going to be performed at a recital. I'm not recording it. It's just, for me, has actually been far more difficult to do than I realized or ever thought would be, because it's doing it just for me was never a thing. So now trying to do that, and grappling with, I don't want to say, is it okay? Obviously it's okay that I do stuff for me, but also, where's the line? Where's the line of this is beautiful and this is art, and partially some of the pieces that I'm playing are because I got inspired by someone publicly putting their art out there. I wanted to learn that piece. So when I choose to keep some of these things for myself, it almost feels selfish, right? Of just like, you know, who's missing out now on me not putting that out there and allowing them to now feel inspired. I think that's a interesting cycle that I continue to go through with a lot of the things I do, but it's very apparent in my music because from, you know, day one, it was, you know, you're doing this with a purpose outside of just playing.
Yeah. I mean, when you said you were competing from the age of 5, that's just so much deep programming that, like, you're just at the tip of, like, recognizing what this is. And I can relate to that so much, especially in music, because, as you know, the last couple years for myself, I've dealt with some personal kind of life things, and it's completely shifted the way I look at life and maybe even who I am. And sometimes, like, I'm still trying to figure out the comfort level and how I share that or how I communicate that in a public kind of like social media world. But, like, you know, I have plenty of conversations about this in, like, real life, IRL. But, you know, when it comes to music, I'm in the same boat at the moment, in that my identity, I've held on to so much of being a musician or being a singer-songwriter that, you know, right now, I can't say I have, like, this burning passion for playing. I haven't lost hope for it, because in the same way that I thought this craft talk thing was a dead end a year and a half ago, a conversation with you or a conversation with Robbie just kind of kicked it back up. And then now I'm like, okay, I'm feeling really alive with this right now. So I have to believe, I want to choose to believe that in the future I can pick up that guitar and then have it feel like myself again.
Yeah, I understand that completely. I'm fortunate that I've had even some students over the years that are older adults, and I've had beginner older adults, but I've been very lucky to get students that are older, even like retirement style age, who are picking the piano back up after not playing for like 30 years, 40 years, right? But now they have the time and the space, and they want to do it again, and just approaching it in a different way. I'm always so excited to teach people like that and have it. And I also, like, I had one woman I taught her for almost 3-4 years, and she was in her late 60s and was trying to fill her life with hobbies again. She had gone to school for piano. She went to Wayne State and got a degree many, many years ago, but then immediately went into like banking, and that was her life, and then really didn't play. And she recently went back to Wayne State and is in their master's program for music now. That's what she's choosing to do at this stage of her life from doing this again, which is like such a cool story, but also like, do I want to wait till I'm 60 to get reinvigorated with this again? I hope not. But it just is it's a reminder of the stages of our lives. We don't know how long some of those things are going to hold out like that. But I do think that, especially with music, when music is part of your identity, it doesn't ever leave, but like there's hope that it'll always come back to some degree.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was telling you this, but I was telling somebody this, that I get really, like you were saying, where it can get scary and sad sometimes, of like accepting that maybe this thing that was part of your identity for so long isn't. Where I was telling someone that I hate that me being a pianist or a musician is now like a fun fact. It's like a fun fact about me.
Yeah.
And I really, it's like people go, oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, that's interesting. And it's like when someone says that, which is a completely normal reaction to someone meeting me at this, like it's no fault to them at all, right? And but it hit when people go, oh, that's so interesting, like a little fun fact. It hits me in my soul in a terrible way, because it was like this is all I was for so long. And to now, you know, I wish I had more excitement about, oh, I'm all these different identities, I'm all these different things. But it's just when I think, especially you and I can relate to this too, of like music was the encompassing thing for so long, and that's what we did, right? We didn't have tons of other outliers of stuff. You know, it can be super challenging to even, I think sometimes wrap my head around, okay, well, you know, I've done marketing for over 10 years now. It's not new, right? But it's evolving, and even my career is evolving, and how I approach work is evolving, and thinking like, oh gosh, this is changing. And I'd love to be that person that gets super excited about what's on the horizon, but I don't always, because I sometimes feel that same hit of when someone's like, oh, that's interesting about music. I get the same thing of like, oh, that's interesting, you used to do marketing or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know, it hits, it's like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to reinvent myself. I don't know if I want to do that. Will it feel as terrible as it did when I think I abandoned music, you know? So yeah, I definitely get it.
Yeah. And that's part of the work that I'm sure we're both personally trying to hopefully work on, is that, you know, we have friends, and, you know, myself as a friend to you can reaffirm you in saying that, like, you are a musician, you are a pianist, but the acceptance of that is all on us to figure out. And like, yeah, of course I'm a singer-songwriter. I have, like, you know, albums on Spotify. Like, I can logically say those things, but to fully believe it in myself, that's where the hard work comes in. And we're in our mid-30s, so we're not too far off from our 20s yet. So a majority of our life has still been wrapped up in those previous kind of like identities, whether good or bad, you know? And the hope is maybe when we're over time, we can start accepting that time for what it was, and then hopefully not take the 30 years, like your example, to welcome it back into our life and it be fulfilling again. But yeah, we're in this weird space, and add to the fact that we're millennials and we're like trying to figure out how to monetize everything.
Exactly.
It gets real tricky. It gets real tricky because it's, I think another thing that you said was like, you said you were competing at piano at 5. You know, are we sharing the things that we're sharing because of the pressure that people need to see it? Or are we sharing it because we just love to do it? And if I was honestly trying to answer that right now, it's kind of like, I kind of want people to see it. And it's masked behind this idea of like, I'm doing my passion project. Like, let's be honest, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but for me, yes, I love doing this. But yeah, it's like, could I do this and still feel like I'm doing creative work if I didn't post it? That's tough.
I know. Super tough. I spent this morning coloring before I started work. I'm trying to like just coloring a mandala page, like very easy, like with markers and not something really just simple, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to do something for the sake of creative, for the sake of doing something, right? Just because it always can invigorate your mind and whatnot. So I do think there's still a power in creating just for yourself. I think that it's so difficult to know when you rip the Band-Aid off and now you share it, right? That's also such a huge act of bravery. You know, when I think of that, really, like when I think of people doing that, the first thing comes to mind are like physical, like visual artists, right? And how hard it must be as well to like share your work that way, or, you know, and share, you know, putting that creative work out there and letting the masses decide like their thoughts around it. I hope there's just so much when you intertwine social media, when you intertwine the public with all that. I also think that the landscape of how we consume things and how we digest information is scarier than it used to be, right? I like the public opinion of everybody's exact thought as soon as they think it is immediate. And so to even be able to be like, oh, I'm going to put this out here is brave in itself, right? Because it's easy for everyone to give their completely unfiltered, exact, like, opinion, and it can change into a million things, but there's also beauty in that too. You know, there can be a lot of incredible beauty in that too. It's just super complicated. I just think that's, or also maybe is it also though that, yes, we're not so far removed from our 20s, but we are far enough removed where now we have fear. We experience more fear in the risk of everything that we do. We've had enough failures where we now know what happens and what that feels like, and then we're more risk adverse, right? And so we don't, you know, it's like do I have the mental capacity to take on negativity right now? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that can get in the way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely just the vulnerability of putting yourself out there. You know, even like small creators who relatively have like a smaller kind of like following or group, it's hard to constantly put yourself out there and then have this machine called the algorithm be fighting you in that like some of the people that follow you aren't even seeing your stuff, right? So now you're incentivized to kind of analyze, okay, what is getting traction? So whatever the flavor of the month is, it's going to start skewing the way you present your stuff, and you might start taking on another tone of voice that's not you.
Yes, for sure.
And because it's picking up more traction, and I think it's fine to experiment, but it makes me wonder, like, where's the balance? It made me think of like, so in the last couple months, I dipped my paws in Threads, and I suck at it. It made me realize why I never really got into Twitter or X. Like, I think there's really fun conversations that are happening on Threads, and I've actually surprisingly had genuine kind of like interactions with a couple people, but I have a hard time. It feels like, and I could be wrong, it feels like when you put like just like a short statement, it's very like declarative and definitive, and I don't operate like that. I'm very much like I resonate more with like the observance of the conversation that what we're talking about. And I kind of have like, oh, it could be this, it could be that, but never fully definitive of like, this is how it is. the secret to creative work is this. And it seems like a majority of what I read on Threads is a very definitive kind of statement. And it's getting the most kind of like interactions because it's yes, like, but how do I know to trust what you're saying? I don't know. Or are you just like one of those social media gurus trying to sell me on something?
Yeah, I think this is also a case of, well, I think this is also a case of the platforms, while some of, like, they're vast and you can do a lot of things on most platforms as well. They have their own personalities, in the sense of, like, if you are someone who's comfortable with making definitive statements and declarative things, and you understand the cadence of how that stuff works on Threads, you're going to do really well on that, right? Mm-hmm. If you're someone who has mastered the art of what's almost like a FaceTime conversation, it feels like a FaceTime conversation style video, just chit-chatting away about something and you don't ramble on or whatever, and you're maybe a little funny or you're really good at storytelling, you're going to thrive on TikTok, right? If you've mastered the art of how to write an engaging, even long form post, but very niche into a specific group that you're in on Facebook, you're going to thrive there, right? And I think that it's still a case, well, this isn't necessarily new, but it's definitely a case of, we feel this pressure to be everywhere or try everything, but we're still in a season of, depending on how you put content out there, is whether or not you'll be successful in that on that platform at all. Which is why even a tactic or process that I've recommended forever is you start with one, right? And you get really good at that one. But don't just, like, when I preach that to clients, it's where are your clients, right? Then you go to that platform. Your clients are everywhere, truthfully. Now it's more of how, now I'd say it's which platform is going to allow you to be your most authentic self, because it'll be easier to create content that way. You'll feel better about sharing the content that way. You'll be more engaged with the people on that platform, and you will just do well. I still see people still grow their numbers exponentially and quickly, organically on Instagram. But the people who are doing that, like going from 1,000 to 10,000 in just a couple months, but the people truly who are doing that and doing it correctly and not buying followers or whatever, are people who have intentionally set their effort on that platform. I want to use Instagram. I understand how to present myself authentically here. I know how to speak to people here, and I like engaging here. It's still working, right? Yeah. Definitely, to your point, like those type of statements and those like declarative statements on Threads and whatnot, I'd say that's those. Yes, there's always the noise of people being like, well, I understand how to use this platform, so I'm going to just do it on this platform, right? But then the people who are really doing well in a way where maybe it doesn't feel as icky reading through their declarative statements on Threads, it's because that is where their authentic self is thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like a thin line, right? And you can kind of feel it out. And maybe sometimes just depends on the time of day that you're reading it. Mm-hmm. It's like, I feel like there's this balance of expertise and then also humbleness. To me is kind of where that authenticity lies. I guess, like, I never thought of it that way, in that, I mean, it seems obvious, but I just didn't think of it. Like, each platform has a very specific skill set that it would be catered to. Mm-hmm. How would you categorize those skill sets per platform? Like, if we were to do Instagram, Threads, YouTube, and like TikTok or something. Yeah,
TikTok I definitely say is storytelling, like expert storytelling, right? And like in a vision, and when I say visually, I mean, well, it's visually and verbally. Like even some of the best storytellers, all they're doing is just showing their face and there's nothing else there, but they just are really good storytellers in whatever they're talking about. So if you have a storytelling presence, it will do well there. I would say Threads was created in response of Meta's option for like a Twitter or X. And what it still operates in that similar way, where if you can be concise in what you're saying, but are welcome, but you want conversation though. You're being concise and declarative of what you're saying, but you are actually looking to converse in the thread, right? That's why Twitter, people who were on Twitter that did as well as they did, that's what it was. It was long threads of conversation and whatnot. It's really more of, but you know how to make a succinct point, right? But it's all, or you know how to be succinctly funny, right? You know how to tell a good joke, right? Or whatever, something like that. Or you have a hot take, but you also are willing to go further and discuss what you're saying, right? Because I don't think it's enough to
what I'm doing, because what I'm doing
you're
is
just
like,
giving the hot take and piecing out.
Well, it's like, it's funny because I've been trying it, right? So I post, like, takes me forever to think of a friggin' thread, but like a lot of times I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna take from some of my Instagram posts, and I'll take like a quote from someone that I interviewed, and then I'll share the link, and then it auto populates kind of like the thumbnail and all that stuff. But then I look at my feed, and it's like, this looks like Instagram just inverted, where like, in Instagram, it's like the picture and then text. But in Threads, it's like, oh, it's the text and then the picture. I was just like, what am I doing? It's like the same exact thing. And yeah, it's because I'm not, to me, I was looking at it like it was just another platform to share.
Well, you're trying to repurpose your content there, which repurposing looks different than it used to, right? Repurposing was more like that. Like I'd say a few years ago was still very much, you could absolutely still do stuff like that. And it was very successful. It's almost not, And almost, I think that I'm also seeing people who, like, let's say on Instagram, they present themselves as, I still think that Instagram is still an area where you present yourself with a certain identity, right? And can do very well with that. And however you create content that way. Instagram's a bit of a mess. I don't have it's a bit of a throwing darts thing. Yeah, you can do reels, but I find what actually works on Instagram to be very, like lately, very uninspiring, right? Like people just staring into the screen with an audio and then having some controversial or clickbait style text over it is just very uninspiring, right? So
yeah,
if you're uninspired and you're uninspiring and you just honestly want to just start throwing darts to figure out what works, Instagram might be your best platform, right? A little bit, just to kind of, because I will say that is a lot of the conversation I'm having with people on Instagram is, oh my gosh, I've had this happen several times in the past month. Oh my God, this reel just all of a sudden took off. I have no idea why. Do you have any suggestions on how to capitalize on this? Share the reel again, make another one similar. That also might not work. Just keep showing up, right? Keep showing up and cross your fingers a little bit. So it's really confusing. But I still think it's a place where people still put you in a box of identity, right? People still put me very much in the box of this marketing expert on Instagram, right? Yeah. Where my presence on TikTok could be completely different, right? And truth be told, even if people are watching me in both places, they're aligning with one or the other, right? They're not consuming probably both. I don't have any advice on what to do with Twitter and X. I feel like it's very overridden by bots and rules. You can't even consume most of what's on there, like in the sense, because there's limits of things. And so I don't but what I do see is people who had very niche interests and groups and industries on Twitter previously, right? That have a community there are still doing well within their communities. They may not, those communities may not be growing or expanding and whatnot, and it may be hard to find them, but they're within their little communities they're still able to exchange information pretty well and it get out pretty well. So I do see that. And like, that's kind of similar. I'd say the same thing on Facebook. Facebook is very much driven by groups. It's driven by those niche interests on those groups. And that's really it, right? It's your activity within a group. Trying to build up a business page, even your personal page, it's kind of mucky. I feel like people don't really even go look at those anymore overall. They're looking at what is the activity happening in a group. So
what if you were mentioning on Instagram, you know, some people that have grown in the right way from like the 1,000 to 10,000 or whatever. What have you observed were they doing correctly or innovatively?
Well, what they're doing correctly is they have found a consistency and cadence of showing up, whether that be a new post once a week, maybe a post a couple times a week. Like I definitely see people who are only posting one time a week, like a new dedicated reel, like on their feed. Yes, they're sharing things probably daily and whatnot in their stories, and they're putting out or they're sharing content in the sense of things that are going to create and encourage conversation, comments, or even a emoji laugh reaction in a DM or a comment. But I genuinely believe the secret sauce to that is still they are consistently showing up at a regular cadence, right? So like every Friday, you're going to expect you can see a new post, right? Whether you see it on Friday is irrelevant, but they are doing that for months and months and months and months on end, even if things flop, right? And most of it does, right? But what's happening is that it's just almost like how SEO, you're just building up the catalog, to that degree. I will say though, I still see from those people and even like comments and things that they share that they still feel pressure and it doesn't always feel good and that they don't always like it, but they're doing it and it's working, so what I'm seeing is like, it's the same thing. Like if you were going to commit to, I'm working out, I'm going to do this, I'm going to lose this weight, I'm going to go to the gym this many times, I'm going to do it's the same level of dedication, even when it doesn't feel good. Right. So that's what I'm seeing is that I wouldn't say they necessarily have become lovers and convents of the platform of the sense of like, oh, we love this so much and I love doing this so much. They've just dedicated themselves to a very strict engagement routine.
If you were to give me advice, because I, with the knowledge that like I have a lot banked right now, so I can be a little bit more strategic with it. I've noticed that like the page is growing here and there, but it wasn't like when I first started the page.
Yeah.
I was like getting I don't have a ton of followers or per se, but like I definitely noticed it climb a lot faster than right now. Obviously we're in a different landscape, so it's a little bit different to be more visible, but what kind of advice would you give me in a sense of like, I don't know. I feel like not to be like high on my own supply. I really like the quality of stuff that
Absolutely.
I'm putting out.
Yes.
I have enough of it. For the most part, I'm consistent in that like usually 3 to 4 times, maybe even 5 times a week I'm posting.
For sure.
High quality, like what I feel is high quality, I guess. Yeah. What do you see in my page that I could be doing to maybe be more visible, I guess?
So I feel like on your page and what you're doing with your presence is the maximum of visibility. Where the rest of the visibility needs to come now is out in the rest of it, right? And you do this, right? You share other people's content and things of that nature, but it's probably more of the engagement of commenting on those different conversations, like just probably more engagement on other pages or other areas, right? And being strategic about which ones you're doing that on, right? Not necessarily the big ones or the ones that we see, because it's easy for us to like scroll through reels that are just showing up on our For You or whatever, and scrolling through and engaging more with the people who are following you in their stories, right? Like commenting, like, sending quick reactions, sending comments, all that stuff. And I'm not saying you're not doing that, but that's what I would say is that you've got the consistency piece down of putting content out there. It looks great. It sounds great. It's snappy. And you put out different forms of it. That I feel like you're good about replying to people and commenting back when people are engaging with your page. Now I say it's the whole, now you got to go out there and kind of put the sign up of being like, hi, I'm here to network, right? It's kind of like, now you got to go network, right? And being mindful of like, okay, so where are those areas that you're going to do that? Now, for example, right, with so many that you've put out of clips of you and I from the first conversation, I get so many people engaging with that from my area that weren't familiar with you, right? And now they start engaging with you too, but that's where you go, right? Okay, so it's engaging with my followers. Now that's a new follower. Now engage with those followers, right? It's not so much the big page. It's like these smaller ones that are already interested. How do you engage with their followers, right? And then from there, that one leads to a new one. That engage with those followers. And it's just kind of capitalizing on that rather than just commenting or liking on maybe some of the more viral stuff or more popular stuff. And just continuing to cultivate those relationships. It's harder to do and it takes longer, but I will say, especially as AI becomes more and more and more present in our day-to-day, especially with social media, the more real human activity that we have, as something as simple as a basic comment or another DM or another laugh reaction or whatever, it hits that dopamine sensor different, and it will, it eventually starts compounding on itself. It does take a lot longer to do that on Instagram than it used to, but it can be done.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's wrap this up. You were really generous in sharing some of the insecurities and vulnerability within how you feel about yourself in social media. Is there something from this conversation or conversations outside of this recording that we've talked about that like you're trying to implement right now to feel a little bit more at home in this space rather than feeling like, do I even want to do this? Like we're all trying to feel like a little bit more comfortable with it. So is there anything that specifically you're trying to work on at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'm working on trying, to accept that it's okay for me to have multiple identities and find ways to intertwine them in a way that makes sense, that when I present things that may seem left field or whatever than what I've normally done, it doesn't feel that way. Right? So that way I don't feel so self-conscious or uncomfortable with continuing to evolve what I'm doing or who I am, right? We talked about today, right, my whole music background and how that intertwines with what I'm doing now and what we're going to do in the future. And these conversations, again, are like good reminders for me of like, they do all connect. There is a reason why, to whether it doesn't always seem that way off the bat, immediately that they connect, or sometimes I forget that there's a reason why they connect. I'm that reason why they connect. But feeling okay and comfortable with that. These platforms are changing, they're evolving, they're dying, whatever, right? At the very least, I don't need to be as self-conscious about the fact that I'm doing that too. It's not perfect. It's not going to look maybe as formalized as I've done in the past, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that. We're getting there. We're cruising there.
I love what you just said, and I don't even know if you caught it. Like, you have all these different identities. We all do. As we start off as musicians, and then we become graphic designers because we don't want to pay for a graphic designer to do our cover art. Like that's how it, and then we become our own business agent, website designer. We become all these things, and then we start building identities because we want to try to monetize and make a business out of it. And when we get lost in that, we're like, well, if I'm not any of those, what am I? Right? But I love what you just said, where you just like, they connect somehow. It's me. I'm why they connect. So I think it's just like trying to find this and accepting that they do connect because of me. because of you. All those things, whether we feel them or not right now, they connect because it's connected to me.
We both have done this, right? We did this in school, right? Where we'd get an idea, we get so excited, and we'd barrel through that, right? And it would create really cool stuff, but none of that was sustainable. Not doing that was not sustainable. Unfortunately, we were in a position where we had to keep doing it that way, right? And I think that then taught us like to just keep doing it that way, even post that school situation. But I would rather not feel the depths of burnout at that level, and more consciously take the uncomfortable, intentional break.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, we just don't want it to become another identity that we're going to resent down the line.
Absolutely.
You know, like that's at the end of it. We're trying to get off the hamster wheel. We're trying to like take ownership of it a little bit more. So this was an awesome conversation.
I love it.
It's so different from the other one that we just did. Yes. The other one we did was very high energy jokes, like nonstop, like make fun of shit, like it. But this one was so grounded and like much needed. And I'm surprised that I shared as much as I did. And those are the best types of conversations when you always wonder how you're going to share the vulnerable parts of yourself in an authentic way without sounding like preachy. That's what we just did. So I don't know.
I think
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, Tito.
So on the next workshop, we have some ideas. I don't know.
Yeah. I always love where these go. You know, you bring a couple ideas and then they take a life of their own.
Unfolds. Yeah. Cool. Rachele, thanks for, I'm just going to do a quick outro. Thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate you having this chat with me, and we'll talk next time.
Great. Thank you, Tito.